The serving size section of the nutrition label is really a controversial topic, and let me explain why. So many of us think that the serving size in the nutrition label represents the amount of food that we should consume to lead a healthy diet. But in reality, the serving size is not a recommendation of how much to eat. It actually represents the amount of food that people typically consumed. And if this is news to you, you're not alone. There are studies that show that many people misinterpret or misunderstand the meaning of the serving size in the nutrition label. So let me backtrack a little bit and talk about the history of the nutrition label. The nutrition label, as we know it, was actually created in 1993 by the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA is a government agency, and they are the ones responsible for regulating the nutrition label and any food claim or food labeling put into our food products. So they're the ones who created the nutrition label prior to 1993. Labels existed, but they weren't standardized. So the FDA standardized this label, which means that even though the nutrition label looks very simple to you and I, every single term written in the nutrition label is set, defined, and regulated by the FDA. So that takes me back to the serving size. Now, you and I, when we use the term serving size, I think intrinsically or intuitively, we go to the amount of food that we should consume. I mean, I'm a dietitian. I've been a dietitian for about 9 years. I have a master's in nutritional science. I do nutrition consulting a couple times per week, and I can tell you every time, or almost 100% of the time, that I use the term serving size, I'm referring to the amount of food that should be consumed. So it's very normal for us to think of the serving size as the amount of food that we should consume. But again, big shocker, when you see the serving size written in the nutrition label, remember, that is not the amount of food that you should be consuming. It's the amount of food that people typically consume. When the label was invented by the FDA in 1993, the serving size written for many of the foods sold at the grocery store was actually based on the amount of food that people consumed back in the late 1970s and 1980s. That's where these amounts were actually taken. If you've ever wondered, why is the serving size for yogurt half a cup or whatever it is? It's because that was the amount of food consumed by people back in the 1970s and the 1980s. I mean, as of late, the serving sizes were actually updated, and I'll get into that. But just going back to what I was saying, these serving sizes were not based on what, nutrition professionals or people with like PhD in nutritional science getting together, and doctors and getting together and saying, hey, this is the amount that someone should have of like yogurt or ice cream or chips or crackers. That's going to be a good serving size, and this is what we should base it on. No, it's based on the amount that people typically consume. And this is a definition set by the FDA. And this is something that we all have to learn and not get things confused. The Food and Drug Administration regulates our food and regulates these labels, but sometimes the definitions that they set are not what you and I naturally would think they mean. And again, the serving size is such a good example of this. In addition, the Food and Drug Administration knows that the serving size terminology listed in the nutrition label is misleading, and that there's many consumers, specifically women and people trying to improve their weight, misunderstand the meaning of the serving size. So they know it's misleading. They've actually opened up for comments because recently they've updated the nutrition label information. And when updates are made, the FDA does open up for commentary. And there were a couple of comments made to the FDA and requests made for them to clarify or to educate us consumers on what the serving size actually means. One of the recommendations given to the FDA is that they should simply put an asterisk next to the serving size, and in the bottom of the nutrition label, they should just give a disclosure and tell us the serving size is not the amount of food recommended to eat, it's the amount of food typically consumed. That would be the best form, in my opinion, of education, the best form to spread this information. Because if you are someone who's looking at a nutrition label, you almost, I would say 100%, you would see that little asterisk, you would see that little disclosure, and then boom, you would now know what the serving size actually means. But the FDA declined to do this. They know that there are studies out there. There's actually studies done by the National Institute of Health, which is another government agency. They know that the serving size is misunderstood because it's honestly misleading for the FDA to define the serving size as the amount of food typically consumed, not the amount of food that you should consume to help you improve your health or to help you eat a healthy diet. Because at the end of the day, the nutrition label is regulated by the FDA. The FDA is a government agency. The government is supposed to be working for the people to help us, the consumers, make better choices. But honestly, this definition of the serving size is just another example, in my opinion, of how the FDA is failing us and is not making it easier for us to make better food choices. So you and I have to educate ourselves. So if you're someone who didn't know what the serving size actually meant, don't feel bad. It totally makes sense. Just make sure to tell a friend, tell a family member, spread the word, because I think that we cannot wait for the government to improve these terms, to improve the food labels, to improve food. We have to take it upon ourselves to become educated and to know this information. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Vanessa, sure. Okay, kind of interesting, right? But what does it matter? Well, there are actually studies that show that there's many people who, because they believe that the serving size is the amount of food that you should be consuming, they consume whatever the serving size is of that food and think that they are doing the right thing. Now, this matters because the serving size was actually updated. It was updated back in 2016, and it was based on the amount of food that people consume in the mid 2000s. And here's a big shocker, guys. What people consume in the mid 2000s is actually more than what people used to consume back in the late 1970s and 1980s. So what does this mean? It means that the serving sizes now listed in our food products are now bigger because we consume more food. So here's an example. For ice cream, the serving size used to be half a cup. Now it's 2/3 of a cup. So if you're somebody who thought or who thinks, hey, the serving size is the amount of food that I should consume to lead a healthy diet, and you're looking at your label and you're trying to do all the right things, because the serving size is greater and because you believe that's the amount of food that you should be consuming, now you're going to eat more. And is that really, what we should be doing? I mean, it's kind of debatable, I don't know, like your health or like what you're trying to do, but there's definitely an obesity epidemic. There's definitely pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes on the rise. So if you are solely depending on the serving size, you're being misled. So again, this matters, and the FDA is refusing to give us any, I don't want to say education, because they do try. I don't even want to say they try, but there is educational materials out there. For example, if you go on the FDA website, I'm going to show you this interactive nutrition label. So when you go on this website, they clearly state the serving size is based on the amount of food that is customarily eaten at one time, and it is not a recommendation of how much to eat or drink. Okay, awesome. But if you're not looking for this information, or if you're not, someone who lives in this world of nutrition and health, there's no way that you would know this. I mean, when I was in graduate school, I remember doing education to the community or sharing with the community about the nutrition label. And to be honest, I don't remember learning this or spreading this information. I don't think I was aware of this. I would just talk about how the serving size, you have to base all the information on the serving size. And if you're eating twice the amount of the serving size, you have to multiply everything by 2. but we never talked about how, hey, this is not actually a recommendation of how much you should eat, and actually define it. So if you have to look for this information, that's basically what I'm trying to say. And I want to show you guys a video put together by the FDA, because back in 2016 they updated the nutrition label. You know, it was a big deal, and I'll get into it and into the details in another video. And honestly, my thoughts on the nutrition label is that it is helpful to some extent, but it can work against us in another extent, because food companies can just put a good amount of protein or fiber, or put no sugar but have a bunch of artificial sweeteners. Like, food companies can do certain things to make the nutrition label look good, but the food product is actually not better, and it's not like good for our health. So you have to learn about the nutrition label, but you also have to become more aware of like the ingredient list. And I'll dive into all that information in another video. But right now, what I want to do is I want to show you this video put together by the FDA. And this is how they want to educate us on the nutrition label.
That large, bold font for serving size brought down the house.
Talk about making a statement. Did you know that serving sizes are not a recommendation of how much to eat? They are actually based on the amount people typically eat and drink today.
I didn't know that. Tell me more.
All of this info is usually based on one serving. Pay attention to the new bold serving size. Then ask yourself, how many servings am I actually eating or drinking?
See what's new and what's been updated. The new nutrition facts label. See what's in it for you at fda.gov.
That is the education that the FDA has put out. How many of you guys, I mean, leave it in the comment section below, but how many of you guys had seen that video or knew that the serving size is the amount of food that people typically consume? I don't think many of us did. So again, this is how the FDA, I feel, is failing us. One, the definition for the serving size is not straightforward. In my opinion, it is misleading. Two, instead of putting a little disclosure in the nutrition label, which would be visible to anyone who purchases a food product that has a nutrition label, they much rather educate us by putting information on their website, which we then have to find. But if you don't know what you are looking for, you don't know that you need to look. And second, they're doing these very engaging videos, and of course I'm being sarcastic. The video was corny. I like corny things, but regardless, this video is never going to go viral. It's not. I mean, it was very straightforward and clear, but this is not going to go viral, which means that you're not going to get the information, right? Because that's how we get information now. You get it through YouTube, you get it on TikTok, you get it on Instagram, and these videos are not going viral. So you're not really going to get the information unless you're looking for it. But again, how do you know that you're supposed to be looking for this information when serving sizes should just be the amount of food that you should, consume, or maybe recommended to consume to be healthy, or at least that's my opinion. Another thing that could be done, and was actually suggested to the FDA, is to just get rid of the term serving size altogether. Call it something else. Call it something that is more clear. Like, one recommendation that I saw that I actually liked was just put amount per half a cup. Right? That's not saying that that's the serving size. It's just, I'm telling you, this is the amount in half a cup. This is the amount of calories and carbohydrates and sugar and fiber. That may be a little bit more clear. I don't know if it would still be misleading. My number one choice is having that asterisk where it tells you this is not the amount of food that you should consume. It's the amount of food that people typically consume. Okay, guys, I hope this was informative to you. I hope it was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.